The last 2 weeks at work had been damn hard, but if you believed the cheers of the colleagues around him, then everything was fine. Apparently, the spring product line will be very successful. Bosses will earn more money, and workers will get a full-time job and a salary, and possibly a decent overtime allowance in the coming months. Even the chances of a decent bonus at the end of the year looked very promising. Jeff decided that he could afford to just sit in the hotel bar and order another 1 or 3 beers at the company's expense. Everyone wins, he thought. The Hilton Hotel Bar was not his usual place to hang out. Jeff usually preferred more rundown establishments with dim lights, creaky wooden floors, and, preferably, a layer of sawdust or walnut shells on the floor, suitable for having a few glasses and even swinging a little on his shoes if he had a pretty dancing partner. Marketing chose this location for an impromptu corporate party on Friday afternoon to celebrate the launch of this season's new product line. The Hilton had the largest TV in the area and a spacious enough outdoor bar area for people to watch the fashion show live or just sit and enjoy the good news. Besides, it was a good place to catch a taxi home after drinking too much. The vice president of sales also tried to get one of the large conference rooms to cope with the influx of factory workers, but they were all busy for another sales seminar, so everyone was happy to sit in the bar. It was almost impossible to hear your own thoughts because of the TV and talking on mobile phones, but at least it was a loud and cheerful sound of prosperity. Just a few years ago, the company was so broke that the company's annual picnic was reduced to gatherings and BYOB, English, bring your booze. Today the mood was good and everyone was happy. Some of the sales and marketing girls were demanding more champagne, and the glass aquarium behind the bar was already half full of car keys. A few smiling and winking couples even headed to the hotel reception to rent a private room for a romantic celebration. Damn, it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was definitely better than a real day at the factory. Cindy, the blonde bombshell from the marketing department, who was already pretty loaded by this point, and was looking for underground alternative entertainment herself, staggered up to Jeff on her 5-inch heels, showing off a vast and interesting valley of cleavage and a lot of hips. She offered Jeff a glass of champagne, but he declined, and she quickly found a more interested and very willing partner, eager for a bit of a horizontal party. Jack knew that it was very pleasant to make love to Cindy even in a semi-loaded state, and he had tried her services a couple of times in the past. At the Christmas party, she satisfied half of the board of directors by leaning over the punch table, demonstrating that she was not wearing underwear and begging all of us to fuck her to the fullest. So far, Jeff wanted to limit himself to beer and had no desire to break away from the crowd, although the idea of drinking a glass or two of whiskey in honor of the holiday was beginning to sound quite reasonable. The early sales forecast for this season looked good, maybe even great, but he still remembered the hard times that had passed not so long ago, when no one knew if the next day would be the last in the company. Jeff lifted his beer mug in silent remembrance of those difficult times, and that it could have been even worse. After a few more beers and 3 fingers of decent first-class whiskey, Jeff was almost tipsy and seriously considered leaving the party early, or find Cindy and invite her to frolic in bed. The mood in the sales and marketing department was even more cheerful, and the aquarium with car keys behind the bar also looked damn full. He had just started to slide one tired buttock off the bar stool when he saw in the doorway a sight he hadn't seen in 15 years. It was his ex-wife Maureen's ass. He would have recognized that ass anywhere. Maureen hadn't seen him yet and had been talking to her husband Dave for a few minutes. Soon he left her at the bar and headed for the conference rooms. He was wearing a cheap suit from a department store and, apparently, was here on business related to another sales seminar that filled most of the hotel. He looked about 20 years older and was not particularly attractive. He was much thinner and looked less athletic, slouching slightly in the shoulders. Thinning gray hair didn't do much to improve the overall look either. There were a lot of old and mostly bad stories between them, and although Jeff probably wouldn't piss on Dave even if he was on fire, it was a little sad to see how low he had fallen in this world. The old Dave always wore expensive European suits and looked fit and tanned, as if he had just spent the day on the golf course or on the tennis courts. For him, the image was always above the essence, and now the image didn't look too impressive. That's what almost 7 years in prison will do to you. Maureen, on the other hand, looked in slightly better shape. It had always been expensive to take care of her, But today she was dressed much more modestly than Jeff was used to seeing her. Less makeup, simple jewelry, and an old-style dress that looked beautiful but restrained. She certainly wasn't at the height of fashion as she used to be. She still held her head high as she walked towards the bar, but perhaps there was a bit of her former arrogance missing from her walk. When she saw Jeff at the bar, she froze, and at least 100 different emotions flashed across her face before she turned to leave when he invited her to join him. Shame combined with embarrassment, but in the end, both gave way to submission. Without meeting his eyes, she took a seat next to him at the bar and ordered a glass of wine. She started rummaging in her purse to get some small bills, but Jeff told the bartender to put it on his account and keep bringing drinks, and he shoved a $20 tip into the bartender's hand. Jeff looked at his ex-wife for a long time. She also lost weight, and upon closer inspection, wrinkles were found on her face that no amount of makeup could hide. Obviously, things hadn't been going too well for her lately, but there was no denying that she was still attractive. Their divorce was not very pleasant, and Jeff was very angry with her for a long time. Nevertheless, this was the woman Jeff had lived with for almost 5 years, and with whom he had spent a few happy moments at the beginning of their lives. He didn't wish her well, but he also didn't want her to be unlucky for the rest of her life. His father, an old-fashioned rancher in Central Texas, had drilled his principles into Jeff from an early age. Loyalty to friends, inflexibility before enemies, and compassion for the defeated and helpless. Beating the enemy was more than acceptable, but it was also appropriate to extend a hand of friendship to him after that. Don't hold grudges, he was taught. Maureen seemed to fit into this latter category, although most of her troubles were caused solely by her own actions. Karma, of course, can be nasty. It seemed like only yesterday that she left him. It's funny how time is slipping away from you. Jeff met Maureen back in college in Texas. He received a half scholarship and worked 2 jobs to pay for his studies, while Maureen's wealthy family in Dallas paid for her studies in full. Of course, Jeff was a more serious student, since Maureen spent most of her free time hanging out with her rich party friends and caring little about her studies. How the two of them managed to fall in love with each other and start a serious long-term romance, no one could figure out. Jeff was a serious and practical business student in old worn jeans and cowboy boots who had seen a lot of real cow shit in his lifetime. Maureen was a sociable and fun-loving humanities student who dressed for the nine, even on everyday occasions, and loved to shop in the best stores. She was very demanding of herself, both financially and emotionally. Anyway, their love strengthened and grew on this rather rocky ground, and they got married right after graduation, much to the misfortune of both parents. Jeff's father believed that Maureen was too frivolous and too wasteful to become a worthy wife. And he was right. Maureen's family considered her partner to be just as socially unsuitable, since Jeff had neither money nor connections, and they were partly right too. After graduating from university, Jeff worked for her parents for 2 years in a lower management position at one of their companies, but he did not like the job, nor the snide and condescending sense of superiority that they constantly showed him. Then, unexpectedly, he received a job offer in the North, in the Rust Belt of Ohio, as a middle-level manager at a small, struggling shoe factory, and, to everyone's horror, he immediately accepted it. The new salary was not too good, and the benefits were minimal, but Jeff saw some prospects in this opportunity and immediately quit, to the anger and annoyance of almost everyone. Maureen was furious, but reluctantly followed her husband. This was the last straw for her highborn family, and they stripped her of benefits and family credit cards, leaving her to exist only on Jeff's limited income. Unsurprisingly, almost immediately after that, serious problems began in their relationship. He enjoyed the challenging job at Hudson Boots and Shoes Incorporated, but keeping the factory running every month was a constant challenge. For every solved problem, there were at least 2 more hidden ones. The owner, Ralph Hudson, was a decent boss, but his knowledge of modern accounting and business management methods was practically non-existent. Besides, he had a heart condition, which limited his time in the workplace and attention to important details. The factory was losing money every month, and all accounts were kept on paper and without a special accounting system. The sales were decent, but not exceptional, and the expenses somehow always exceeded the income. It took Jeff several years to trace exactly where all the money disappeared. There was waste and inefficiency everywhere, But the most serious losses went into the pockets of sales manager Dave Weston, his main management competitor at the company. Every time Jeff suggested something to improve the company's work, he was sure that Dave would defend the exact opposite point of view. He was a supporter of the status quo in the company and opposed any form of modernization and computerization of accounting, and now Jeff knew exactly why. It soon became clear that the two were irreconcilable rivals in the fight for control of the company's future, and Jeff began to dislike the smirk that constantly appeared on Dave's face, as if he was enjoying some private joke at Jeff's expense. Jeff prepared very carefully for each meeting with management and soon won more boardroom battles than he lost. But because of this, he had to work long hours and not pay Maureen as much attention as she used to receive. Their home life began to suffer almost immediately. Dave led a very expensive lifestyle and, according to Jeff's roughest calculations, fraudulently lured the company out of about $70,000 a year for at least the last 5 years, and maybe even longer. He ran sales and purchasing departments, always dressed in expensive suits, owned at least 3 expensive Rolex watches, and drove a luxury BMW convertible. Too much for his salary, which was barely more than Jeff's. In addition, he received personal kickbacks from our customers and suppliers for everything he bought or sold. The quality of the leather that the company received was constantly decreasing, and our costs for it were growing. Now we knew why sales were slowly falling and costs were constantly rising. It goes without saying that his personal expenses were, to put it mildly, excessive, and testified that all these years Dave lived happily at the expense of the company. Convincing company owner Ralph Hudson to fire Dave was not easy, as everyone in the company was fascinated by the smooth-talking thief Dave. But in the end, the evidence of Jeff's investigations, with the help of a team of financial auditors and a couple of independent private detectives, could not be denied, and Dave was finally fired. This should have been a great triumph for Jeff. He eliminated his main competitor in the management of the company and now got a promotion, becoming the new director of operations, and even with a small increase in salary. But when he returned home, he was even more surprised. Maureen moved out and left him for Dave. It shouldn't have been such a big shock. Maureen has always been one of Dave's biggest supporters, and she liked him from the very beginning. She liked his quick temper and swagger, and she constantly tried to get Jeff to follow his example. At some point, they began an affair, probably around the same time, more than a year ago, when Dave's grin became permanent on his face. Well, that only made Jeff laugh, but it didn't seem so funny anymore. The issue of filing a fraud and theft case against Dave was discussed, but in the end Ralph Hudson refused. He was not such a forgiving person, but the extremely fragile financial situation of the company could not withstand the strain of a public fraud investigation or trial. Even the slightest hint of the chronic financial mismanagement that the company has faced for almost a decade would be enough for suppliers to stop lending to the business, effectively dooming the company to ruin. Instead, it was decided that everyone would keep the fraud secret, keep their mouths shut, and thoroughly restructure the company from top to bottom, and pray to save her from bankruptcy in time. Jeff hadn't heard much about Dave and Maureen. They immediately left town, and she filed for a quick divorce in Vegas. Before leaving, she had completely cleared the family's bank accounts and had just taken out a large loan secured by their house. As part of the divorce agreement, she wanted to receive another $10,000 for moving expenses and a large amount of monthly alimony. Jeff filed a countercharge of fraud in connection with an illegal home loan, showing that his signature on the loan document was forged and proving that the fingerprints on the document belonged to Dave, not him. It took some time, but the family court judge rejected her request for alimony and moving expenses and refused to charge Jeff with paying Maureen's extensive court bills. As a result, both Maureen and Dave pleaded guilty to fraud. Both received severe punishment and a suspended sentence without imprisonment. Maureen was able to keep all the money she had previously taken. It had been spent a long time anyway, with no hope of a refund. The divorce took place, and they went their separate ways. No one was happy with the final verdict, and Jeff's legal fees left him destitute for several more years. However, it closed the door on that painful period of Jeff's life. About 2 years later, Jeff found out that Dave had gone back to his old ways at a new company in California, and he was caught by the hand in a cookie jar again. At this time, Dave quickly married Maureen, apparently so that she, as his wife, could not be forced to testify against him. This time, he was prosecuted, and at the sentencing hearing, details of some of his previous frauds were presented as evidence. He was sentenced to 14 years in state prison and had to serve at least 5 before parole. In addition, his probation in Nevada was canceled due to a violation of parole conditions, and after being released, he will have to serve 2 more years there for the old crime of forgery. Jeff didn't feel the slightest bit sorry for him. Dave was vicious to the core and got what he deserved. He was surprised to discover that Maureen had really been waiting for him faithfully all those 7 years that Dave had spent in prison. He couldn't help but wish that she had been at least half as faithful and devoted to him when they got married. Love is such a strange thing. Well, Maureen, it's been a long time. You look great. I think everything is fine. You still look the same as if you haven't changed much. Maybe a little heavier and a little grayer, but it suits you. You look good. Age and gravity are the real traitors, aren't they? It seems like only yesterday we were together, maybe arguing about some stupid things. It's funny how time speeds up when you get older. Maureen agreed, and they drank their drinks in silence for a few minutes. I noticed Dave in the hallway with you before you came in. Are you still together? She nodded. We came to a sales seminar. Tomorrow he will be presented with some kind of minor award for the fact that he sold the most household appliances in his area last quarter. He's here now. Better. Not such an ass. He has always been a good salesman, but now he has put his life in order and works hard. It was very difficult for us for a while, but now everything is gradually getting better. After you left, the factory was very busy for a while. Difficult. Dave left us in a very bad position, and we almost closed the doors forever. Now, looking back, he regrets it. In fact, we are grateful to Hudson for choosing not to press charges. It would have been the third blow to Dave, and he would still be in jail. While he was in prison, I had to go to work to support myself and pay his court bills. I'm not used to it, and I can't say that even now I like it, but I've learned to respect people who have to make a living. Did your family cut you off? She nodded again and finished her wine. The bartender, who received a good tip, immediately refilled the glass. At first, they liked Dave very much, and they paid most of the divorce costs, but when his other legal problems began, they literally cut off the relationship. He borrowed a lot of money from them, which I only found out about after he ended up in prison. In addition, during this time he openly cheated on me several times, and they were angry that I continued to forgive him. After his release, he was mostly loyal to me, but sometimes it happened that he disappointed me. Nevertheless, we try to deal with it. I'm trying to repay at least some of the debt, but my letters home always come back unopened. Come on, say it. Mom and Dad have always been arrogant assholes, and they only started liking you after you were gone. Jeff laughed and agreed. Old man Hudson wanted to hang Dave's eggs on the wall, but soon after that he had another severe heart attack and had to retire completely. He moved to Florida to devote himself entirely to fishing and left the reins of the empire to his daughter Carla. Crazy Carla? The one who lived in Greenwich Village in New York, went to art school and majored in radical feminism? That's the one. Long black hair, very gothic appearance with piercings in all parts of the body, wherever it was possible to insert it. She used to be a committed lesbian who hated men and anything remotely resembling capitalism. The responsibility was good for her. She studied fashion design and discovered that she had a knack for it. Since she took over the company, she has completely redesigned our entire range and made our women's fashion collection a hit in Milan almost every season over the past few years. The big Milan shoe fashion shows? The biggest ones. Fashion and style channels regularly show our latest collections performed by the best models in the world. Now almost all major fashion houses in Paris wear our shoes at their shows. You probably don't read Vogue that much anymore, but they think very highly of us and consider us to be one of the biggest guys. At today's show, a new line of underwear, Gloria Regina, was presented live from London, during which each model wore our shoes, from slippers and sandals to shoes. We all watched the show on the big screen here and counted the number of happy customers in the hall. We no longer need to sell shit at Wally's or Kmart. Now we're at Macy's, Neiman Marcus, and hundreds of other boutiques around the world. Oh, she said, and focused her attention on a glass of fresh wine for a while. So you're all right? Are you still the director of operations and running the business? What is it? She asked. I'm still running the business. Carla is the owner and our chief designer, but she lets me run all the business. She still doesn't really like talking to people. However, a few years ago, when I married Carla, my position was slightly changed. Technically, I am now a co-owner, but I prefer to be called simply boss. Did you marry crazy Carla? Maureen said, almost spilling her drink. I thought you said she was a lesbian? I was, and still kind of is. Let's just say she's a little more attractive now. We had to work very closely for several years to get the company out of the garbage pile it ended up in. Since we spent 16 hours a day together for a while, every single day of the week, we eventually began to stick to each other and decided to make our connection more permanent. She learned to tolerate old Western music, and I learned to tolerate her love of the avant-garde. It's working. Sometimes she even goes dancing with me, or one of her friends goes with me instead. Now, with children, getting out somewhere is getting a little more difficult. When she's at home, she likes to play mom. She is a wonderful mother to all children. Do you and Carla have children? We have 2 kids, and she's not averse to having another one before we stop. He took out his wallet, pulled out an accordion, folded photo folder, and pulled out the first 2 photos. Here's Jack, he's 8, and his 6-year-old sister Charlotte. They are our elders and the only ones who live at home with us. Are there others? Where do they live? I'm confused. Jeff smiled and began to lay out some more photos. Many of Carla's friends are committed lesbians, but this does not mean that they do not want to have children of their own or do not mind sometimes dating a man to have them. Carla treats her friends very well and helps them solve their personal problems. Jeffrey is 5 years old, and his mother is one of Carla's oldest friends from New York. Amanda will also turn 5 soon, and her mom is a famous fashion model, whom I'm sure you would recognize. I also helped her with her other youngest daughter, Carrie, who is 2 years old. I think she also wants a 3rd child, because she is going to come to visit us for a long time at the end of this summer. Jeff posted 3 more photos, but Maureen was already in complete shock. Do you have 5 children with 3 different women? And does your wife approve of this? We have a very unconventional relationship, but we are happy. She loves children. The more fun it is. It's not that they all live with us, but I sometimes see them when they come to visit. Besides, when I entered into this marriage, I knew that my wife would cheat on me with other women, repeatedly and often. So each of us has our own freedom, and I can have my mistresses. I think it's good that she talks about it honestly and often shares it with her friends. It makes the relationship more trusting. It's certainly better than finding out that your wife was having an affair by returning to an empty house. I've always felt awkward about it. We should have sorted out the situation and broken up better. I was going to write and apologize, but time slipped away and I never did it. Her glass was empty again, and Jeff signaled for them both to have another glass. They drank in silence for a while, but then his BlackBerry signaled an incoming message. He looked at him and laughed. Look what my dear wife will bring home to me tomorrow. He laughed and showed Maureen the message and the image attached to it. A very explicit photo taken with a mobile phone camera, in which 2 naked and very beautiful women were lying together in bed. This is her new supermodel girlfriend, whom she met on the runway in London last week and has already managed to get her into bed. They met again in Milan, and now she's going to bring her home with her tomorrow to spend a week or 2 here with the 3 of them. I just love the way my wife takes care of me. Maureen drank the rest of her drink in one gulp and stared at the empty glass for a while before starting to say goodbye to leave. Jeff, I was glad to see you again and I'm glad you're okay, but I have to go and meet Dave. I see that after I left, you found happiness in your life. I wish you all the best, but we are unlikely to come back here again. They hugged briefly, and Jeff took out all the money left in his wallet, several $100 bills, and squeezed them tightly in Maureen's hand, not taking no for an answer. Take this and treat yourself to a nice dinner tonight or later. When you get home, buy yourself something nice. He may be trying to improve, but the old schemer and deceiver is still inside him. Dave was a rat in an expensive suit and will remain a rat in a cheap one. Draw a line in the sand and make him stick to it. The next time he cheats on you, show him the door. You're a better woman now than you were then, and you don't deserve it. Throw him to the side of the road and be strong. In the worst case, you can cry to your seemingly rich ex-husband. Call me and I'll help you. A plane ticket, a job, and a clean start, at my expense. Not a loan, but a gift from an old college friend. We were friends once, long before we ruined everything by getting married. Be healthy, Maureen." With a final hug, she left the bar, still clutching the $300 gift tightly in her fist. She wanted to throw them back in his face, but he didn't offer them out of malice or twisted humor, and she really needed the money. Dave was drinking again, and the meager savings she had stashed in an old cookie jar at home for a rainy day suddenly disappeared a few weeks ago. The bills started piling up again. Perhaps the old, bad Dave had returned to her again, and she wasn't sure she could handle it. The second meeting with her ex greatly embarrassed her. She offended him, hurt him, but he got off the ground and succeeded. If she had only trusted him and had the patience to wait, she could have lived in the wealth and privileges she had always dreamed of. And the children, those children she had waited too long to give birth to, waiting for better times to come. Judging by the photos, Jeff turned out to have terribly beautiful children, and they could have become her children. Instead, for reasons she cannot explain or understand to this day, she fled the ship in search of the first opportunity, but soon found herself in a much worse situation than the one she was in before. Almost from the very beginning, Maureen was tempted to go back to Jeff and ask for forgiveness, but pride and arrogant ego did not allow her to do so. What a stupid young woman she was in those days. Maureen missed a planned shopping tour of the city with her other wives. She was sitting quietly alone in the hotel restaurant, drinking coffee and thinking about the mess she had made in her life. Besides, these days she had very little money of her own to spend on frivolous purchases, and going through the storefronts at the moment did not attract her much. Watching the hotel lobby from the restaurant, she wasn't surprised to see her husband Dave slip out early from one of his sales seminars in the company of a busted blonde. Together, they took the elevator to her room, where they stayed from 2:30 to almost 5, just before Maureen was supposed to return from a planned shopping trip that she had missed. Maureen listened to the cheaters making love and waited patiently outside the door until it opened and she and her future ex-husband finally settled the score. The last 15 years of her life had really been wasted. Jeff was right, she thought. It was really funny how time was slipping away. It wasn't a big surprise when, about 2 weeks later, Jeff got a call from his ex-wife at the factory. He did not believe that the cunning leopard Dave would ever change his spots and believed that he still had a talent for hurting everyone around him. The fact that his ex had remained faithful and devoted all these years to this cheating bastard said only good things about her, and he was ready to bury all the old axes and help her start over with a clean slate. True to his word, he transferred money for her to move and a plane ticket and found her a nice apartment a few minutes' walk from the factory. Money no longer mattered much to him. They were earned much faster than they were spent. He could offer her several job options, but he really hoped that she would accept the position of his new administrative assistant. His long-term secretary, as well as a long-time playmate of both himself and his wife, was about to give birth. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mother, at least for the next few years, and even hinted that she would like to get another child from Jeff as soon as possible. The thought brought a smile to Jeff's face. Maureen had always wanted to have children herself, but economic conditions did not allow her to do so when they were married. She didn't have any children with Dave either. Now, working for him every day, it might soon be her turn to end up with her ass up and no panties on his desk. Better late than never. The thought that he would soon have the opportunity to impregnate his ex-wife also made him laugh from irony to pain in his ribs. Life is a funny thing. It seemed like only yesterday his wife had left him, and now she was back in his life again, ready and willing to pay any price for his help more than 10 years later. Isn't it amazing how time slips away unnoticeably when you're having fun?